Hello. Oh, it is working. Excellent. Right. Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Sally Fenton. I'm head of Smart Energy and Built Environment Innovation at BEIS, and BEIS is the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. So I'm very pleased to be at Future Build again. We've been able to doing project teams to speak to people at Future Build for the last few years, so I'm very pleased to be back again this afternoon to present some new projects which we're funding through the BEIS Energy Innovation Programme. And for those of you for whom it's a new thing, the BEIS Energy Innovation Programme is a £505 million programme that's providing innovation funding to a range of low-carbon technologies, all in support of delivering the government's 2050 net zero target. And part of that £505 million energy innovation programme is used to support smart energy innovation. And smart energy innovation is a great sort of cover-all phrase. I'm always very happy to introduce myself as head of smart. And smart energy innovation covers a range of different technologies, but also processes and business models and ways of consumer engagement that are all aimed at enabling the transition to a low-carbon, sustainable, robust, and flexible energy system in the future. And through the Smart Energy Innovation portfolio, we're supporting different types of flexibility, including energy storage, demand-side response, which we're going to be talking about in a bit more detail this afternoon, also flexibility markets, vehicle-to-grid, and I think there were some sessions earlier today, if you managed to catch them, on vehicle-to-grid technologies and the potential role for vehicle-to-grid. We have programs that are looking at smart energy management and working through smart meters. And we also have a couple of international collaborations, working with both Canada and with South Korea. There is further information about all our programs on gov.uk. And the companies who will be presenting this afternoon are all supported through our demand-side response programs, both our domestic and our non-domestic demand-side response programs. And those two programs are providing combined funding of about £10 million, but more than £10 million going to 15 individual projects, and they're supporting the development and also, crucially, the testing and trialling of demand-side response, both in homes and also in schools and businesses. So this afternoon, we're going to hear from 5 companies. I'm going to ask the speakers to come up so they're ready to speak, so to talk. So our first speaker this afternoon will be Dr. Mary Gilly from Energy Local. And then we're going to have Dr. Thomas Swiffen from GEO, Green Energy Options. Then Richard Ryan from Grid Imp. James Hoople from Mixergy. Sorry, James, I've thrown you by making you come up at the start. Thank you. And Louise Wall from Passive Systems. We haven't got very much time for each of the projects. Each colleague is going to speak for about 10 minutes about their project. So you'll have a sort of overview of the projects that are going on, and I'm sure you can follow up with the speakers if you want to know a bit more. I'm also going to be here for a little while after the presentations, so if you have questions about our programs or about BEIS, I'm afraid I can't cover the whole of BEIS energy policy, but if you've got particular questions, I'm very happy to at least field them as best I can this afternoon and take questions back to the department if necessary. And that's it. So I haven't got anything more to say other than to thank you all very much for coming along and listening and finding out a bit more about our programmes this afternoon. Thank you, and I'll hand over to Mary. I think I'm passing the microphone.
That one's working, is it? Right, okay. Yes, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you today. Before I move on to our work on demand-side management, I probably should just give you a little bit of a background of exactly what Energy Local is trying to do overall. And yes, all good, it's worked. So, one of the gaps in the market to actually encourage people to think about when they're using electricity is the fact that most people, even if they've invested in local generation, they don't have a means to gain a benefit directly from using that power unless it's being used on site when it's being generated. And so what Energy Local does is we form what we call an Energy Local club of local households who maybe they've invested in local generation, or it may be owned by someone else within the community. And rather than the power just being sold to a supplier at 5-6 pence per kilowatt hour, if those households are using it when it's being generated, they all have smart meters fitted, so you can show how much they've been using every half hour. They agree a price that is higher than the price that a generator would receive from a supplier, but it's lower than what a supplier sells power to a household. There's an additional incentive to move your electricity use away from peak times, because any power that is not being generated locally, say middle of a summer and the hydro isn't operating, or obviously at night if it's solar, is sold by the supplier on a 3-band time of use tariff. So it's cheapest during the night and most expensive at the sort of peak times between 4 and 8 o'clock at night. Because they're sharing that power out within the community, it means that we need to take into account when everybody's using power, as well as how much generation there is. So, for example, at 6 o'clock at night, there might be lots of hydro, but if a lot of people are using power at that time of night, you might get a sort of smaller slice of the cake than, say, at 12 o'clock in the middle of a day when people are out at work and they won't be using as much power. So this project under this work stream is a means to make it much easier for people to get the best out of Energy Local. And one of the things to emphasize in what I've described there is it's what we call before gate closure. So there's a lot of work about the, oh my goodness, we've not got enough power, or we need to mop up all that solar after what's called gate closure. So that's the point after everybody stops trading electricity and National Grid takes over. What we're doing here is saying, well, how about we actually encourage people to use power in the way that we'd like them to use it before that point. So we're actually changing the demand curve so we don't get into that sort of slightly emergency situation in the first place. We're focusing initially on Energy Local Bethesda. There's just 100 households. They all have a half-hour settlement. First of all, we started with just what we call an energy dashboard to sort of show the good and bad times to use power during the day. And now we're developing what's called the Energy Local Home Hub. And it means that people can say, I need this appliance finished by X time. It takes this long to run. Find the best time to run it during the day. So if it was a sunny day, it might be in the middle of a day if it's solar, for example. The household stays into control, so it kind of gets away from that feeling of sort of big brother switching your washing machine on for you. These are our partners, running till next year. So we want to demonstrate this home hub and get the sort of community feedback, find out what people can use it for, find out how to make it better for people in those 2 locations. And also with De Montfort University, do some sort of what-if scenarios of the impact at scale across the country. And when I say at scale, it's kind of a collective impact. So it's actually a great benefit to a DNO on a small scale. But if that's just in Bethesda, well, so what? But if it happens in lots of places, that means the network runs an awful lot more efficiently. So quite unique in this, what we call demand shaper, works out kind of the good and best times to use power each day. As I say, very few projects are looking at before gate closure. The actual sort of local market that we're developing is very much first of its kind. And as much as possible, we're working on a sort of open source dashboard that means we can really sort of harness the community to improve the design of it. This is a dashboard itself. That's an example of a forecast for the hydro, and behind it you can see actually when people have used power as a community. Above it you've got weight, so it's kind of a just simple go, no go. And we also have a little bit of fun, so then the other tab shows the star rating. So if you used all your power at the cheapest time of day, you get 5 stars. If you've used it all at the most expensive time of day, you get no stars. You can get quite obsessed with that, I can promise you. And then down at the bottom, we try to show the difference between when you use electricity and the cost. So obviously, if you use a lot of electricity in the middle of the night, but that will actually be cheaper because that's a cheap time to use power. One of the advantages of the sort of open source approach is that it's much easier to translate it into different languages. We're working in North Wales, so we've got it in Welsh and English, for example. There's a few more of our sort of screenshots of tips and prices at different times of day. Moving on then to the actual Home Hub and how we're scheduling it. This is an example of kind of the simplest approach. Let's say it was a slow cooker. I knew it was going to take, say, 3 hours to cook my stew. I wanted it done by a particular time in the evening. So I can put those in, plug it into a smart plug. It won't switch on straight away. I can go out to work and it will switch it on in the best time, which in this example is the middle of the day. That's the orange part that shows when it's going to come on. So I've been testing out this along with other people in my house. Something that's also been worked on is for electric vehicles. Got one particular charger that we're working with at the moment, but we want to actually make it a lot more sort of brand agnostic. And so here actually takes into account how much charge you would like. So maybe you don't actually need a full charge, or maybe you would prefer to have a whole charge. You can put that in, and also when you would like it to be charged for. And Tristan from Megnu is working with us, and he's been testing this and putting in absolutely the minimum charge he needs to check that it actually works properly. So I think, you know, he practices what he preaches. He's a brave man to be the one who tests that one out, and he hasn't got stuck anywhere. And then what we'd like to do, and this is very much work in progress, is to do the same for electric heating with storage heaters and heat pumps. And here, one of the things we found with further work is that actually temperature is not really a very good means to work out how warm you want to be. It depends on humidity, it depends on the type of house you've got. And actually what people want to know is how warm they are. Do they like feeling nice and cozy, or you know, are they kind of somebody who just doesn't even notice when it's snowing outside? And so we just ask people how warm they want to feel. Work out then how much, you know, heat needs to go into the storage heater and the best time to do it. Obviously, if you need the heat in the evening, if you actually charge the storage heater near that time, then you will actually save a bit of electricity as well, because it won't kind of sort of trickle out before you need it. All that said, although we're trying to do this kind of before gate closure, we have also demonstrated the principle of kind of sending an emergency turn down signal if things are really going a bit pear-shaped. And then it's automatically uploads this to the demand signal, so it will reschedule any loads that have been scheduled to avoid that time. And we've shown that in principle. Originally, we'd have to wait until there actually was an emergency to show it in anger, but we have actually shown the principle of it. And I was monitoring my washing machine, and it moved its schedule to a better time. That said, it's not something that we want to use the whole time, because the whole idea of this is that we're actually trying to change people's habits. And if you keep sending sort of erratic signals, then people don't know whether they're coming or going. So it would have to be something that is used sort of quite carefully. I think probably one of the things that is really quite unique about what we're doing, though, is not just about the technology. It's also about getting people's feedback, understanding where things fall over, where people get stuck, how we need to improve it, and actually really getting people's feedback of actually what they want. So that gives you a brief overview of what we're doing. Yeah, very happy to answer any other questions.
Thank you very much, Mary. I think, given the time, what we'll do is ask all the speakers to come up, and then we should have a few minutes at the end to ask questions then. Thank you. Okay. Right. Here we go. Tom. Sit back down so I can wave it.
Thanks, Sally. Hello. Well done sticking around till the end of day one of Future Build. I'm sure there's a drinks reception waiting for you not long away. My name's Tom Whiffin from a company called Green Energy Options, or GEO, we like to shorten it to. And as the rest of us here, thanks to Sally and Bays for giving us some funding to test out some exciting concepts. So we called it our project Core for Grid, and I'll explain a bit more about that in a minute. Just to start, though, if you've not heard of GEO, we believe ultimately that most people want to be sustainable, but they don't necessarily know how to be, or it's a bit too much effort once they find out how, or it's a bit too expensive. And so our kind of whole mission is, how can we enable affordable, hassle-free sustainability? How can we do that in a way that brings people with us, and we can all live in a happy planet? How do we do that? That is, as a tech company, ultimately we're building devices that help people to understand their energy, to explore their energy. Then once they've understood it, they can control it. And once they can control it, actually we can automate that. They can trust the systems, they can sit back and relax. So this is a little range of our technologies. And the company's been going for 14 years almost now. So there's 5 million devices out there helping people save energy, which is great. But where we're going with all this is into the hybrid home, and that's bringing all of this together in one kind of new energy ecosystem. It's like a grid-friendly home, so it enables the house, when it's electrified with your heating and your EV, your solar panels, actually it connects very well with the grid and can respond to those signals. So the EV charging, the heating, the battery, the solar charging, all things that we'd done before the project, but actually the reason we were excited when we saw the funding was, let's build this grid response module. Let's get all of those benefits talking to the grids, making a home that is good for the consumer, good for the household, but also responsible to the grid as well. So you can see Core, which is our energy brain, for grid. That's where the name came from, okay? Very good, Core for Grid. So the project, we set out with this high aim to demonstrate, in a catchy way, demonstrate market and household acceptance of and engagement in the domestic flexible future grid via hybrid homes today. Easy to remember? Yeah. So we shortened it to just demonstrate acceptance of the flexible future grid today. And to do that, it's a 2-year project, £1.4 million of funding. Oh, sorry, part Bays, part industry funding, and started back in November. To do that, obviously, we can't do that alone as a tech company. So we can do the bid in the home, we do that well, but we needed some homes to try it in, so we brought on board some partners, so the Housing Association, Charitable Trust, and a couple of housing associations who had homes that would be suitable. We then needed the energy infrastructure, so we brought on board Upside, EDF, and UK Power Networks, all already active in our energy system, already understand the flexibility markets and do it for the non-domestic side of flexibility. So lots of learning we could get there. Everrose are a brilliant consultancy, and they kind of set the groundwork in terms of what are we going to answer in these questions, what are we going to try and solve. And then Cambridge Energy are our kind of academic authority, making sure that what we say is actually true, and they're kind of a third party. They're not they've not got any reason to kind of stay friends with us in that sense. They can tell us the truth. So, what have we done so far? We have installed hybrid homes. This is our flexibility test bed up and down the country. Ourselves and Hacks working closely with Gen2 and with Worthing Homes and EDF. We had hoped to have some house builders involved as well, but for them it was a bit too new, so they're watching closely to see how we do, and then we'll progress with that conversation. That's a little sample then of the houses on the left. But in detail, what's the technology that we've installed? So we decided to try and keep this as close to business as usual as possible, which I appreciate for an innovation project is a bit funny, but we wanted to do something that we could prove could go to market very quickly, could scale and could be suitable wherever your home is. So we built off the back of the smart meter network. As Geo, we've got a legacy of that and done that in many homes. And EDF worked really hard as well to move some things which I thought were already in place around the country, but in terms of getting SMETS 2 meters into the northeast isn't always particularly plain sailing. I can happily share more stories offline about that. But off the back of the smart meter, we then have our CAD. This is Geo's in-home display, and it also sends real-time data. So what we're able to do with that is provide the householders with an app for their energy use so they can see how much is going on. But for the first time, I don't know if I'm making this claim incorrectly or not, so someone who knows more, tell me if it's wrong, but I think this is the first ALC, so the first auxiliary load control that's probably ever happened in the UK. So we're using the smart meter signal coming through in real time to control the battery and the EV charger and to decide to load balance the home so we can actually bring the kind of usage during the peak time down to 0 watts. I have a system like this running in my house, and I had no energy bill for about 2 or 3 months whilst there was just nothing going on during the peak time. The sample size then, so 50% have solar PV already installed, 30% already had an EV, and we put in a compatible wall box with that, and an eighth have electric heating. And there's a few others that are kind of baseline properties to check that we know it can work for anybody. So, the first starting point, the baseline that Everose gave us was kind of understanding what are today's barriers to domestic flexibility, what's stopping us being able to do this at scale. And there was a lot of it was around legislation, around kind of extensive rules, pre-qualification, and the kind of cost barrier there would be because of the benefits on the small scale. So they come up with this kind of recommendation that was all framed around swarm governance. So in the same way that bees in a hive kind of work together without any natural leader, actually by sharing data freely and with some keen principles, we could iterate much quicker and build a much more efficient and sensible system. The whole report is on that link, and it's free to see and reference, but I just tried to pick out a few of the things, and particularly pick out what do we then do as Core for Grid to take this forward. So the first thing was to say, can we do this business as usual? Can we adhere to the codes that EDF and other suppliers have to stay to? We decided not to get a derogation from Ofgem, although that had been our plan initially, but we thought actually we could get to market faster if we don't go through that route. Can we use the smart meter network that's already being deployed? Can we design a tariff that can get signed off with all of the codes of practice within the industry? And then how do we set up the data sharing environment so we can prototype, test, analyze, and iterate on a fast basis? And that enabled us then to start our domestic flexibility demonstrations. So this is kind of the kind of nexus we're in now, where we've got that test bed up and running, the data's flowing freely, and now it's a case of starting to roll out these different iterations. So the first one, similar to Energy Local, is it's got the dynamic tariff coming through, and the optimizer that runs in the home is optimizing people's usage in that home without them having to think about it, which personally I think is quite interesting because we have a breadth of people on the trial, and you have the really kind of energy engaged, the self-optimizers, I like to think of them, who will look at the apps, they will kind of understand what their usage is. So one of the gentlemen on the trial is a customer service rep for EDF, so he knows all of the tariffs, he knows where he can get the best deal, he'll phone us up all the time if we're not giving him the best deal. And so he's really keen being kind of getting some really good stats from his home. We have other people on the trial who are totally the kind of energy overwhelmed, like for them, even getting a bill through the post is overwhelming for them, and they've got too much other things going on in their life to try and get their head around the energy industry. And I think for us to make sustainability work, especially those of us at the technology end of sustainability, you've really got to bring both of those two people with you. You've got to enthuse the early adopters to keep going, but actually if you're leaving the vulnerable behind, you failed in your overall mission. What I'm excited that this is going to be able to do is it means that those same benefits of being able to optimize the energy system can be for the energy overwhelmed and for the self-optimizers. But anyway, more on that later. These are some of the things we needed to get up and running. So through our partners, we've been able to get this. So the access to the service and the markets, the price optimization and forecasting, all of the trading and dispatch. The home optimization is something that Geo do, and then the baselining and sharing data is an interesting one, as those of you who worked in the industry will know. It's a moving feast, but it's one we're partaking in. And I guess some of our distinctives, as was said earlier as well, this ability to stack the different revenue streams and work. So we're doing some day-ahead forecasting and optimizing to that. I guess similar kind of ahead of day gate closure, but more kind of the 4 p.m. kind of closure. And utilizing this smart meter functionality as best we can. The other interesting thing we've seen is by having an integrated approach. So we're working across the heat pump, the EV and the battery and the solar panels. It's meant that we've started to see when sometimes you plug in your EV and it'll want to charge, but because the schedule that the EV and the battery are on are different, or they're responding to different signals, you end up just draining this battery straight into your car, which is totally inefficient because you end up doing 3 different inversions of DC to AC and AC to DC and all the way around. So that's meant that with an integrated approach, we can roll out features to allow you to only charge the EV without draining the battery. So that actually when I plug in my car during the day, I don't have to drain the battery. The battery is going to keep charged up for the expensive time later on. But there's a feature in there that you can switch it off if the user wants to, but we think it's better that way around. Anyway, so that's what we're in the process of doing, but try and bring this to life with a bit of data. It's still early days, but the system is up and running, so some headline figures. We're gathering 30 million data points every month, which is staggering when you think about it. I'm hoping that my team will do something useful with all that data. But some interesting things. So the householders use about 16 kilowatt hours per day. That's enough to brew 477 cups of tea. So it's thirsty work, all of this. Most of those have got, obviously, EV or heating, so that increases their usage more than the kind of average in the UK. Of those PV homes, so I think it's interesting, even in February, so it's not been a particularly sunny month, as those of us who have lived through I don't know how many storms we've had this month. But 15% has come from solar, and 46% from the batteries. That's optimizing the off-peak time, and only 38% from the grid. Notably, I think, and testament to what the optimizing the battery is doing, 86% of that usage, they've managed to get their self-utilization for the solar up to 86%. So 61% would have been what it would have done if there was no optimizer and no battery, but actually putting the battery and the optimizer in, we've got another 25% out of their solar generation. I expect with some of the tests that we're running, that will improve as we go forward. The early signals are there, but I've not got data yet for that. And even the homes without solar have still managed to get 60% of their usage out of the off-peak usage, the off-peak battery supplied power. So there's a lot of potential in there in the home, so we'll see as we roll on what we can do. To bring this to life, I just thought this is my father-in-law. He's on the trial with my new daughter, and I quite like this picture purely because she's about 2 weeks old here, and his system is about a month old, but he's still more interested in playing with his energy app to know where's all the energy flowing in his home than he is about hugging his granddaughter. But this is a genuine quote from him. Admittedly, I asked him for a quote, so it was a good one. But he says, "My favourite thing is knowing we're developing a key tool for society, but also that the personal satisfaction of being able to see my roof generate power that I can use later when energy is expensive. I just love being part of the trial, so thanks, Gio." But there you go. This is, it's not just him. We do get this feedback from a lot of other people who are very excited about what's going on. And as I said, we've got the very energy engaged and we've got the totally energy overwhelmed. So it's a bridge to cross. Anyway, to conclude, 3 main points just to draw out that I think are themes we're starting to pick up and we'll explore more over the next year of the project. But I think utilising the smart meter network, it's possible. I know it gets a lot of bad press out there. I think what we're starting to show here is the smart meter network being able to realise its promise. You can do smart tariffs. We've been able to over-the-air update a tariff when EDF managed to get it signed off and we've done the design. It was possible. There were some hurdles, and I'll explain them if you come and chat to me later. But we've also been able to load balance off the smart meter, which has been great for homes where they don't have room for inline meters, which most of the stuff you'll see, you'll have a CT clamp or an inline meter. If your home is too compact for that, actually you can use a smart meter just as well. I think the home and grid flexibility, that's an interesting one. It's getting that balance between what the users need and what the grid needs, and actually finding that hybrid, because our experience working with aggregators who have done a lot of industrial and commercial flexibility, they're used to having assets that are dedicated just for flexibility, and so they're not quite used to working with consumers' needs in the same way. So, so far so good, but again, we've got some interesting dovetailing of some optimizers. And then finally, I'm really keen to see this delivering affordable, hassle-free sustainability for everyone. So for the energy engaged, the energy overwhelmed and the self-optimizers, both being able to get the most out of our future energy system. So with that, I'll leave it there. Thank you, Sally.
Thank you very much, Tom. Richard, there we go. Let me get the start of your slides.
Thank you.
I think that does work, otherwise you can do the up-down buttons directly on the screen.
Sure. Okay. Hello. Thanks to Bays and Sally for giving us a chance to talk about what we're doing. I'm from GridImp. My name's Richard Ryan. We were funded as part of the non-domestic DSR program with Smart Energy Innovation. We're a technology development company and we are based in Somerset. So I'll talk a little bit about the project that we've undertaken. We've got project partners. Obviously, Bays is a very important one. EDF R&D Centre UK have been really terrific to work with and make sure that we're doing our homework correctly and our value models are working out. And we started off with one project demonstration partner, which is Wells Cathedral School. The reason why it's a really interesting project partner is because it's been there for over 1,000 years and they've over 50 properties, everything from medieval properties to very, very modern day properties, and different functions in there as well. So we've got administration, accommodation, education and catering. So what was the project about? What's it still about, but we're coming towards the end of it now. So it was to create an automated control system to identify controllable load for DSR within businesses. And what we tasked ourselves to do is to be able to find this controllable load and dispatch it without the business even noticing that it's happened. The other unique feature, I suppose, well, I think there's lots of unique stuff about what we do, but one of the unique things as well is that there's no energy assets involved. There's no batteries, there's no PV, and you don't have to have any of those assets, and you don't have to invest in them to benefit from DSR and flexibility right now. So, excuse me. The project aims were to lower the barriers for entry, especially for what were 0.5 to 0.8 commercial consumers. That was anybody who gets a bill monthly and up, but obviously includes 0.0, which is anybody who's half-hourly billed. We had to overcome apathy, and things have changed a lot. We've nearly been at this 2 years. In the last 2 years, this apathy has really I shouldn't say benefited, but it's really been affected by the messaging around sustainability and lowering carbon. And that's really made a difference. It's really made a difference for us in terms of productizing a solution like this. So, as I said before, we're using existing plant. At GridImp, we're really, really passionate about the fact that there's already enough flexibility in the built environment. There's a huge seam of flexibility sitting there, waiting to be used. There's a few issues with accessing that, but it's there. It's there, it's usable, it's sustainable because you don't have to buy new plants, you don't have to mine rare minerals to put in batteries, you don't have to stick on generators or whatever you want to do. You don't have to do that. Use what you've got. We want to reduce businesses' carbon footprint, and one of the sort of technological, if you like, milestones for us and aims of the project were to create this, what we call the IMP Hub. So this is a device that sits locally and processes data locally. So, and what it is, and why we called it the IMP in the first place, is we imagine something that could decipher what you want as a consumer, what you're prepared to tolerate, and what you can give back without being inconvenienced in any way. So for us, that was a huge challenge, and I'm happy to say that we've made wonderful progress there. And the ImCloud, and I won't talk too much about the ImCloud, but it's a very, very light cloud. We don't process our data in the cloud; it gets processed locally, and this is a very sustainable approach because we don't require data centers to back up what we're doing. We're taking advantage of edge computing to achieve our results. So, solution features. Okay, to get businesses interested in energy saving, especially when it's a lower, it's lower down their balance sheet than their their staffing costs and everything else. The solution's got to be low cost. Most importantly, probably, is zero time cost. They haven't got time to be dealing with this. I really, really believe that most people don't have time to continually adjust their energy usage when they want to do things. And they don't even have time to consciously give feedback around this. They're busy. They're busy doing their normal day-to-day things. We wanted to be completely interoperable, use off-the-shelf components that are available today, integrate with existing meters, not just smart meters, but advanced meters, and integrate with the existing systems, so the control and data gathering systems that are already present in businesses, either using IoT or building management systems and SCADA systems. So, because we're near the end of the project, I really should have done this step by step, but I'm not going to go through all the steps. But basically, we started off and we did some test installations. A lot of our work on the software development side has been to get our control policies working properly, to ensure that we can identify these loads, and to be sure that we can do all the administration around that and package it up in such a way that it doesn't impact on customers whatsoever. So we started off installing other test partners. Then very early on, we had an industrial partner come on board, another SME. We've been working away at recruiting more test sites. We're in a few universities now as well. And we carried on just doing our development work and telling people about what we're doing. But what was most important for us was listening to the customers and really getting feedback on what would stimulate them to action. Because if we've got a solution that doesn't require any effort on their behalf, why wouldn't they have it? And what we found was that we got some great results. So we had this box. It would retrofit into a minimum viable product. So I'll talk about that in a second. It retrofits into your BMS system, and it's there. It's acting on your behalf, and it's offering back whatever flexibility there is there. And it pays for itself in, I say less than a year here, a lot less than that in certain times. And we can nail down the value without these customers being in DSR contracts. So we can look at their energy cost differential. We can look at their energy company sending benefits back to this customer, sharing the benefits for non-commodity cost avoidance as well. And in fact, we've proven with early adopter customers, so not just test customers who are paying for our services now, that each kilowatt of flexible load that they have available is going to bring them back about £80 per year. So, to put that in context, there's about somewhere around 350,000 of these sorts of businesses with these sorts of meters, excluding the very, very large industrial commercial. So of those, the sort of flexible loads that we've seen through our studies, but also on the ground with the customers, it's anywhere from sort of 20, 40 kilowatts and up of flexible load that they have available, again, from their existing plant. But what really gets them excited about about our products and our approach and what they can do is not flexibility, it's not DSR. It's not even having a really short payback or a low capital outlay, in fact, OPEX outlay. What gets them excited is to be able to understand, measure, and demonstrably change their carbon footprint. And this is where we were delighted. This is where we were delighted that we could actually go out and get our message across to people, because we obviously started from DSR, and technically we're really interested in it. We were, you have to become familiar with the different sorts of markets, the different sorts of products that the different network operators are procuring. And what we also find is that these products don't often suit the customer. The customer hasn't got time for the contracts. We don't see any reason why aggregators should step in and, extract value in the middle tier necessarily. They already have energy companies with existing contracts, so they've already got a way that they can leverage to get their payments back. And in fact, what businesses need, especially busy SMEs, is they need fixed prices. They don't need flexible tariffs, they need certainty. So by working with their energy companies, they can get benefits from being flexible. They can cut their carbon. They can demonstrably cut their carbon. In fact, they can measure it for the first time in most cases. But they can also they can also get this financial benefit on their bottom line. So, our key findings is the flexibility is out there. I think looking at these barriers to action, we're not going to get people to drive to net zero by saying to them, look, every single one of you needs to have a battery, every single one of you needs to drive an EV. And even when they do start to electrify their heating, in most cases, a lot of these businesses already have electrified heating. They've had heat pumps for years. We're going to say, look, there's a benefit to being involved, being flexible. You can realize that today, it's not just on your financial bottom line, it's also on your carbon bottom line. And then when they do want to make investments, they've got the experience, the positive benefit, they have confidence to make these investments, and you can bring them through a process step by step. And that's what we're doing with most of our early adopter customers, and rolling out our products more widely. So, where are we now? Well, as I say, if I haven't mentioned it a lot of times already, we're already out there selling our products. We're selling it directly to commercial customers and also through value-added resellers like energy companies. We're offering free dashboarding. So if you've got half-hourly data, get it in there, start to learn about it if you want. But operationally, it's not necessary. Our dashboard's only there so you can look at it if you want to, or you can see what changes have happened behind the scenes. But really, it's fully automatic. And that's what we've been up to. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Richard. Well, you're all very well trained now. Thank you. Thanks, James.
That was a good start. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is James Hooper. I'm Business Development Manager for Mixergy. Welcome to the magical Mixergy tour. We are a clean tech startup spin-out Oxford University company. The CEO, Pete Armstrong, set the company up in 2014. There's been a couple of years of R&D, and we've been in the marketplace for about 3 years now. We're going from strength to strength. Our trajectory is like this at the moment. There's a hell of a lot of interest in what we're trying to achieve with the humble hot water cylinder. There we go. Hey, I've got it now. There's a flock of black swans. So all you devotees of symbolism probably know why this is coming up, but I'll explain in a couple of moments. But what's the motivation? What was the motivation behind Pete Armstrong setting up this company? Well, on the 8th of December last year, we had a 6-hour period where people were paid to use electricity. The price of electricity dropped to around about minus £60 per kilowatt hour. Okay. Now, the cost of offshore wind energy also has plummeted in the last 10 years from about £140 per megawatt hour to £40 per megawatt hour. So to put that into context, the cost that was paid to the consumer to actually use energy in this period exceeded the cost of actually producing offshore wind energy. As you can say, is this going to be a black swan event? Is this going to be a rare pricing event, or are we going to see more of this kind of thing in the near future? If we take a business as usual across Europe case, we can see that this isn't going to be a rare event. This is going to get more and more prevalent. In the last 3 months of last year, large producers of wind energy were paid around about £30 million a month to stem the flow of electricity onto the UK network. £30 million a month. On average, it's around about £170 million a year to either stem the flow or to cut off altogether. Okay? It might seem like an extraordinary amount of money, but in terms of upgrading the network to accept that amount of energy, it's a drop in the ocean. So I think we're going to be seeing a lot more black swans all over the network in the coming years. God bless them. So this is a map of Europe, as hopefully you'll all identify. Feel free to take the UK off it if you feel free, but yeah, we're still there at the moment. But what this shows, this was in the summer last year, so what this is showing is the volatility and power across our networks across Europe and the carbon intensity of those grids. I'll play it in a minute. It's like a moving image, but just a couple of interesting things to note. So this is in direct correlation to the prevailing weather conditions as well in the summer period. The light brown colours basically show where the electricity produced has the same sort of carbon intensity as the electricity produced via natural gas. So we're talking about 180 grams of CO2 per kilowatt hour generated. Okay, so on a par with natural gas. The green area, France, gleaming green there, has a very low carbon intensity of around about 35 grams of CO2 per kilowatt hour. They went for nuts, basically for nuclear energy in the 70s after the 1973 oil embargo, and they've just basically been future-proofing themselves through nuclear energy. Other interesting things to note is the dark brown area. So on the opposite end of the scale, we've got Poland and Greece there, with atrocious levels of CO2, so around about the 600, 700 mark grams of CO2 per kilowatt hour generated. This is due mainly to them burning brown coal to produce their electricity. The UK's electricity market has changed dramatically over the last 10 years. Our reliance on coal has dropped from 20% to 5%. Okay. Now if I play this, hopefully, it will play somewhere. There we go. So, as you can see, we've got the prevailing weather conditions. When the wind is blowing, we've got a really intermittent amount of power that's being generated. So in the UK and Germany, we can see the colour flicking from light, we've got green, we've got light brown, we've got yellow. So this is in direct correlation to the amount of wind energy that's being generated in the UK. Okay? Now, as of around about 8 a.m. this morning, the UK's electricity production was 45% created by wind energy, by hydro, and by biomass. And that was before the sun even came out. So when you add PV to the mix, then obviously this intermittency of energy being thrown onto our grid is going to increase. So obviously wind power, 60% is generated at night time. People are asleep. PV in the day. People are at work. So what is this situation driving? What is this driving in the marketplace? What it's driving, as we've been speaking about today, is the value of flexibility across Europe. So the flexible grid technology. By 2025, the value of this is set to triple, by which point there's going to be a ban on gas in new build homes, we think. So what's happening at a more local level? This isn't a ski resort piece map. This is actually an S-curve. And what this is showing is that the potential value of certain technologies in the home, so draft proofing, central heating, hot water tank insulation, condensing boilers, cavity wall insulation, all those things have now reached a kind of pinnacle of where they're going to be in the future. They're now offering sort of diminishing returns for builders in the built environment. So what this does is it opens up a fantastic new market for HEM technologies, so home energy management scenarios and technologies. So at the moment, to take this surplus of renewable energy off the grid, it's currently being wasted, it's currently being stemmed, it's currently being turned off. I think you can all recognize this sort of lithium-ion battery technology. They're not posh fridges. Now, they're a fantastic technology. I don't know what your life choices have been, but I've got 2 young girls. And I know that if I don't give a huge amount of, at least a big stint of lithium-ion powered Peter Rabbit per day, then I'm going to be far greater than I am now. So we all know this technology works, it's been developed all the time, and it's a way of harnessing that power when it's been generated, not wasting it, and then deploying it as and when required. It's a sexy technology, but these are some of the sort of common problems with it. So it's a high capex. So we're talking, for Tesla Powerwall, around about £7,000 installed, okay? The return on investment is around about 10 years, but depending on how the battery's been cycled over its lifestyle, you're going to have about a 10-year warranty on that, okay? It's a very high material intensity, so around sort of greater than 100 kilograms of material, so copper, lithium, cobalt. I don't know if you know anything about lithium mining, but it's having devastating consequences on 2 of the premium areas, Chile, in Tibet, devastating consequences on the environment, okay? Despite all that, the background, the landscape to lithium-ion technology is there, as is exemplified here by the Tesla Gigafactory. We're all aware of this. There's another one planned in the near future. But we already have a Gigafactory, and that's the incumbent production of our hot water cylinders in the UK and across Europe, okay? Annually, we produce a potential of 50 gigawatt hour of annum of energy storage just through the humble water cylinder. The problem with conventional tanks to achieve this, they're slow, they're wasteful, they're dumb. They take hours to heat up. They're effectively just giant kettles. You have an immersion in the bottom. It's just heating a body of water. Regardless of how much you need, you've heated that whole tank to reach a sort of usable temperature at the taps, okay? So they're wasteful. All the water is heated irrespective of need, as I've said. And the control system to turn that water on, I mean, you can turn it on, you can turn it off. They're at certain times of day and just set the temperature, that's it, okay? So they're clandestine controls, effectively. So how does Mixergy solve this? Well, as you can see on the left-hand side of that picture there, we've got a conventional cylinder with a bottom immersion. So as the cold water is coming into the tank, we're effectively just mixing. So all the water that you've spent, all the energy that you've used to heat the water up to that point is just being mixed and it's being diluted, okay? So to reach a usable level of hot water, we've got to heat pretty much 90% of that tank. Now the Mixergy cylinder, instead of heating from the bottom, we heat from the top. So the immersion's at the top of the cylinder. And what we do is we manipulate the process of stratification. So I don't know if you know what that is, I'm sure you do, but it's literally just driving that hot water layer down. We're getting the hot water sit above the cold water, okay? Linked to our novel sensing arrangement and our software platform, what we can do with our clever software platform is basically we can see the headroom that's left in all of the tanks. We can link them together, they can speak to each other. And what that can do is we can take 10 gigawatts of power off the network at any given moment, so we can speak to the grid. So it heats water up to 5 times faster. Our data-driven insights into household requirements are there all through an app on your iPhone or your Android, and it only heats what will be used. It's halving the heat losses. So we sit at the moment between two very interesting trends. So we've got this volatility in the market on the left-hand side, and then basically the advent of the smart home. So all the new technologies you expect to have in a home, and our water cylinder is going to be one of those technologies. We're bang in the middle, and we are certainly very effective in that scenario. So there is a sexy, we think, as lithium-ion technology, but a very low capex, so more than sort of £200-300 additional cost over a standard cylinder. Return on investment around about 3 years, and a very low intensity of dry weight materials all recyclable. Okay, so what have we been up to now? So we've now rolled out nationally with British Gas and with National Grid through Centrica. Okay, in terms of the fleet project with Bays, so we had a funding of around about 670 grand. This is with Restore Energy and Mixed G Limited. So the primary goal of the project was to prove the viability of a residential demand response service through the deployment of smart hot water tanks alongside software integration with the trading arm of a particular utility. We're deploying a test fleet of 50 intelligent tanks with Restore to explore this novel demand-side response control strategy, to explore different domestic environments within the project's duration, to test different propositions to the householder. And the project is concluded, so it's successfully installed these cylinders across a range of different house types, different bed types, different water usages. And now we've successfully rolled out demand-side response across a much wider Mixergy portfolio with Restore outside of these initial 50 trial units. Okay, so our next steps is a much wider engagement through regulation bodies and to build what we call the Internet of Tanks, so a fleet for the grid balancing service. Okay. Well, hopefully that's given you a little bit of an insight into Mixergy and then what we're trying to do with a humble hot water cylinder. But thank you very much for listening. Cheers.
Thank you very much, James. I'll pass over to Louise, our final speaker in the session today, who's going to tell us about the Passive Systems-led project. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. So our project is a domestic demand-side response project called the No Regrets Project. In a nutshell, it's a project to determine how the value that can be derived from DSR can help to build a compelling consumer proposition. So we've taken other insights from other projects that Passive have done and some consumer research from EDF to build a proposition that we have taken to market now to deliver the UK's largest test of consumer appetite for heating services using multi-vector heating incorporating DSR. So essentially what we're doing is installing hybrid heating systems in homes in certain geographic areas and then gathering the data from the performance of those homes. So we'll establish a large population of hybrid heated homes and we'll gather the data via our MMSP package. We will develop the technology to link our passive systems, smart home heating to the EDF Energy PowerShift platform. And then we'll trade hybrid flexibility in a range of DSR markets and measure the performance and economic value. Around all of this, and this is a lot of the work that we've been doing so far, we, with our partners, the Energy Systems Catapult, we're conducting consumer research to understand the consumer buying triggers and to gain feedback on comfort outcomes. So essentially, we're installing all of these systems with the priority that the customer's comfort levels are not affected, but then we can look at DSR within the home as an extra measure. So the project runs until March 21, so we've got a year left. It is a whole system approach to domestic DSR with advanced DSR controls and aggregation. We're linking hundreds of domestic hybrid heating systems to the EDF PowerShift platform and demonstrating trading value in different flexibility markets. We'll be quantifying the benefits of converting the UK homes from high carbon to low flexible flexible low carbon heat, including DSR value creation, and we'll gather data from this on consumer attitudes to both the DSR and the low carbon heating technologies. So obviously the change for these homes from an existing fossil fuel boiler to a hybrid system, will be gathering consumer appetite for that and the motivations for taking up the project. The project was awarded £1 million of grant funding from BEIS, and the image you can see at the top of that slide is the live website that EDF are promoting the project through. So there's the innovation part of the project to do with the DSR, but it is actually a live business as usual commercial activity through EDF's Blue Lab. So these are the partners. Passive Systems, obviously we're providing the smart controls, and they're based on learning algorithms, so their homes thermal performance is learned through the learning algorithms, and then the hybrid heating system is then controlled to maintain comfort for the home, but then also to optimize on savings. And then we'll be introducing DSR activity as well once the homes have embedded into their new system. We've got EDF Blue Lab who are working with us on this, and the Energy Systems Catapult who are gathering all the consumer research and the findings. And the heat pumps we're using are Samsung, that's why Samsung's on there. So at the moment we've contacted hundreds of thousands of homes via a marketing programme that EDF have undertaken, and we're staging this. So we've targeted already 2 geographic areas, and then we're phasing it into other areas. So we're targeting off-gas grid regions in Somerset, Hampshire, Wiltshire and East Anglia, with other sporadic installations across England and Wales where we've got a supply chain to support that. At the moment we've had over 800 customer inquiries, and we've surveyed over 200 homes. So the survey is a normal EPC, and then on top of that a survey to assess the viability of the home taking on the hybrid heating system to ensure that there'll be a sufficient DRHI return. So this is funded through an assignment of rights contract where the customer will then assign the rights over to EDF. So we have to make sure that there's sufficient return on RHI. And then we've got a huge supply chain in place to cover the survey, installation, commissioning, ongoing maintenance, and then obviously managing all of that process. And then there's a support desk as well who are obviously guiding and supporting people who have signed up for this, because they're not, they are involved in the trial, but essentially they're taking on a new heating system for their home and they're committing to it for 7 years. So there's quite a lot of support and management of those customers to make sure that their experience is positive. And the Energy Systems Catapult are gathering consumer feedback and analysing this, and we're sort of doing an iterative process to make sure that the communication is representative of what we need their homes to hear about and make sure that they feel comfortable with what they're undertaking. And then the DSR modelling and use cases have been assessed, and the early stage trials are planned to start for the 2020-2021 heating season, so later this year. So the consumer insights we've gathered so far, so this is from homes who are on either oil or LPG, and there's a general dislike for the inconvenience that customers experience whilst they're on this as a heating system. So they find it expensive, they have constant concerns about running out of fuel, they find that delivery companies for their fuel can cancel at short notice and obviously leave them in an awkward situation. There's concerns about fuel price volatility. And then on the flip side of that, they're in this situation and there's concerns about how to get out of it. So people believe that heat pumps are just expensive to run and can't deliver the comfort that they need. They don't know how to get information about heat pumps and certainly not about a hybrid system. So the benefit of our system is that everything stays in place from the existing fossil fuel boiler and heating system, and the heat pump gets added on as an addition. So there's no requirement to change underfloor heating or replace radiators. So it really is an extra thing aimed to give the maximum delivery of comfort with the minimum disruption. So at the moment we're achieving 2.5 or 3 day installs, which obviously for a complete heating system change is quite a good one. So this is the solution. It's a hybrid system with an air source heat pump. It does reduce the dependency on the oil or LPG, but it doesn't remove the use of oil or LPG completely. It will efficiently heat the home, and the smart control will enable the homeowner to set their heating pattern so that they have control over their what we call in hours, so that they're able to have the home at the comfort level they request at the times they need it. It's easy to install, so compared to a full heat pump solution, there's a lot less disruption to the home. And there is obviously, if anything goes wrong with either system, you still have the fossil fuel boiler or you have the heat pump as a backup. So there is an extra level of reassurance there. The consumer offer that's out there is it's a £99 upfront package with a £14.99 per month fee for the smart controls. And then obviously there's an option then from EDF as well to go onto a Go Electric tariff with a very favourable 10 pence per kilowatt hour rate. And then obviously there's benefits that the customer will experience. They don't have a change in comfort levels, or if anything, it's improved. They significantly reduce their reliance on LPG and oil, which is obviously reducing their concerns about LPG and oil. There is a transition to low carbon heating. It's easy to install, low overall costs. We give them a wealth of after-sales support. Obviously there's behaviour changes, so they'll notice the heat pump coming on, and they'll notice the home preparing to reach temperature rather than just flicking a switch and all the radiators fire up. So there's an education piece that we're working closely with the Energy System Catapult on, trying to ensure that the people who take on this new system understand what they're getting and what the impact to their normal life is, because it will be a change. Subsidised, as I mentioned, by assigning the rights from the RHI incentive. And that's it. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Louise. I didn't even have to wave my time signals at you. It's brilliant. Thank you. Thank you very much. We've had quite an array of speakers talking this afternoon with some similarities, but obviously differences in approach. I think we've got time for a couple of questions, if people have them. Otherwise, I think all the speakers, I'm looking hopefully in their direction, will be around for a few minutes afterwards. So I'll come to you, sir.
With the Mixergy cylinder, are you buying wind energy when there's a surplus at this very low rate? Can the domestic consumer do that?
So we're not buying the energy, no. I mean, in the future, our smart system can link to an aggregator like an Agile Octopus tariff, which can link into that. So our smart system will know when there's a negative price influence on the market and only heat the tanks as and when that happens. That's just one of the options. We have an AI learning algorithm on our system, which basically allows the system to see exactly how much hot water is needed in the household, regardless of how many people are in that household, and only heat as required, basically. So that's just one of the options. But no, we're not buying direct. Does that answer your question?
Is it critical to have this top fitted immersion? Because I don't quite understand how you can stratify down. You see, I've got a solar cylinder. I'm going to be fitting solar, and it's a very large, well-insulated cylinder. So could I have your system added to my solar cylinder?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, with our technology, it can be retrofitted right across to any manufactured tank, basically. So it gives us a huge global reach. But in terms of stratifying that heat level down, I don't want to go into it in too much detail. But it's a very steady control of cold water that's basically taken to the top of the tank and then atomized over an immersion, driving that layer down. So as long as there's not turbulence within that tank, we can be very specific about the levels of hot water in the tank. We have complete visibility of the levels of hot water in that tank, as opposed to a standard kettle scenario. Okay.
Rajat Gupta, Oxford Brookes University. I have two questions. The first is, the success of these kind of smart energy systems depends on user acceptance of these. So do you actively look at user acceptance and user engagement with these systems? And the second bit is, when you are installing all these heat pumps, are you looking at fabric standards as well to make sure that heat pumps are not going in homes which don't have enough insulation, for instance?
I don't know. Is this
Thank you.
working?
I think probably the first question is relevant to all of you, and then a couple of you on the heat pumps.
Yeah. So I suppose one of the great things about Energy Local is it's very much community-led, and none of the work we would have happened without the community actually getting involved. And I think the great thing about it is that it gives people something that is manageable, but something that they can actually do. And it's interesting that sort of the role of doing something for our children, doing something for our environment, doing something for our local area is far greater sort of driver, even for people who are really hard up, than actually the monetary saving. And actually sort of involving them in the whole process. It's a really sort of positive way of doing it, and it's kind of, you almost don't have to do the survey because it wouldn't happen unless they wanted to do it. So yeah.
Any other comments on that first point about consumer
I just
engagement?
I think what you need to this sounds so obvious, but if you look at the customer from their point of view, most people just aren't aware of, a flexible smart energy system. They might be vaguely aware of smart energy. It goes into a big bucket with smart meters and everything else. So they don't have a level of awareness that interested people will. And in fact, there's a gulf of difference. What we found is the only way to connect with people on that way, apart from doing your homework on what their operational context is as a business, because we're doing non-domestic, is to de-risk and fanatically de-risk the installation. And if you can do that and you can get that message across, then you get buy-in. So I'm not installing heat pumps. I'll be handed over to
Louise, thank you.
So just on that first point, yeah, we do a lot of, there's an education piece that we do with all the homes, but there's also, in terms of homes that go through the process, we'll get feedback about their motivations, but also people who leave the process, why they've left the process, so we can apply some of those learnings to the rest of the process in the future. In terms of the heat pump installation, yes, so the survey that takes place is a full home survey done by one of our surveyors, and they will check everything on the home, record all the necessary, and then it goes back to our office for a desktop review, and the heating engineers in our office will make sure that that home is viable, it will produce enough heat demand, and they'll reach the comfort levels, and they'll do things like work out the size of heat pump and things like that. So yeah, it's a very in-depth process before people actually get approved and offered a contract.
Thank you. I'm conscious that we're at the end of our time there, so I think I will kindly volunteer my speakers to just hang on for a few minutes, because I know there are a few other questions in the audience. Could I ask you all once again to say thank you very much to all this afternoon's speakers on demand-side response.